Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
I think our track record in the last 20 years, how many NFC East titles, playoff appearances, and appearances in the NFC Championship game, those are some of the metrics I look at, and I'll compare our record with almost anybody.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which dropped this morning with a couple of nuggets in it you're going to want to stick around for. We'll get into that. New news just breaking on the Eagles. A couple of free agents are out. Football at 4 is brought to you by Dr. Lyle and Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to iloveLyleBack.com or call 856-MAKEOVER. Dr. Lyle and Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. All right, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is in the house. We are ready to go as the Eagles have lost. I guess we'll start there, Jeff. They have lost a pair of safeties, one obviously bigger than the other. Jalen Mills, who played 55% of the snaps at safety. He had to play corner and safety last year. This is a pretty big loss for the Eagles. They essentially need to find two guys to replace one for Jalen Mills.
Yeah, we knew safety was a position, Mike, that was going to be, thin going into this year, no matter what the Eagles did, because they didn't have a lot of money to spend, and B, you've got Rodney McLeod coming off an ACL and well north of 30. They've got Kevon Wallace, who only saw a little bit of playing time in limited doses last year, right? And so Mills was somebody I thought that they might be able to retain on a one-year deal just like last year, not really knowing what the market was going to be like. And you forget that sometimes there are teams that just have unlimited funds, which the Patriots for years did not have because of all the contracts that they did have, and now they don't. And so they had the opportunity to give Jalen Mills $9 million a year. $9 million guaranteed, right? So that's the big number. I look at that in that contract. I mean, it's probably all going to be paid out in the first year. So if he doesn't perform all that well, they move on. But that's still a great deal for Jalen. And honestly, it's a great situation. That's a team that relies a lot on hybrid type of defensive backs and sub packages with their nickel and dime. We don't know yet about Jonathan Gannon and how much he's going to rely on that type of a scheme and a hybrid defensive back. My sense is that he may not be as big into that as you see the Patriots are. So obviously you can see the value there for New England.
Yeah, and on a smaller scale, Rudy Ford has gone to Jacksonville. So two safeties are out the door for the Eagles. Rudy Ford, Jacksonville. Mills to the Patriots. 4 years, $24 million, $9 million guaranteed for Mills. I guess before we get into some of the other stuff, and there's a lot, so stick around. They couldn't. Did they have problems bringing Mills back? Do you think they wanted to bring Mills back? Or were they just ready to kind of start over?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna guess that the $9 million up front for Jalen Mills, it was going to beat anything that the Eagles could pay out this year. I mean, sure, the Eagles could give him $9 million this year and spread that over, from bookkeeping purposes over 2 or 3 years, right? And just make it like a $1 or $2 million cap hit this year. But I mean, I think they've got some bigger fish to fry as far as, backup quarterback and extensions for guys like Goddard, perhaps, and Mailata and Josh Sweat. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's a player that they were going to commit even that much money to and then try to make it work from a bookkeeping standpoint when they've got other positions that they need to address of greater priority for them.
Yeah, I know the Eagles are going to have some issues at safety. I mean, you don't know what's going on with McLeod. Now you lose Mills. Ford, I don't think, was in play there, but that's an underrated thing about what they need to do, and it's not talked about in the draft because there's not really a guy to take in the first round. There's not a safety you're going to take at number 6, so they're going to have to figure out how they're going to fill that safety position. You mentioned some of the guys they do have here, but if you're starting Kevon Wallace and some of these other guys, that's going to be an ugly-looking secondary.
Yeah, Marcus Epps is a guy that had a really nice training camp last year, and they tried to get him on the field more last year in 3 safety situations, and they did get him on the field more, and mixed results. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of players from last year, Mike, that we can say exceeded expectations or played well in the positions that they were given. Outside of Alex Singleton and maybe Miles Sanders, you have a tough time finding anybody who played well last year. Yeah. However, I do think that he's a young kid that they can develop. But I was laughing, as you probably saw, while you were talking about safety, because as you know, just from me working alongside you, and Adam knows from doing the podcast with me, there's probably not a position that I have screamed at. Like, I don't really scream on the podcast much, but occasionally there are some things that get me to drop a few F-bombs, right?
Whoa.
Their ignorance at that position high in the draft has just been astonishing for the last few years. I mean, they have not drafted a safety in the first 3 rounds, if I'm not mistaken, since Jaquan Jarrett, when he went second round in 2011 or 12. And that was a god-awful pick, to be honest with you. They just have let so many potentially good players pass them, and including last year with Jeremy Chin, that it's just mind-boggling to me, because that position, like, I understand that linebacker does not have a lot of positional value for them, and I understand why. But if anybody who's seen the game change over the last 5 or 6 years know that these multi-dimensional safeties, like Earl Thomas, for example, what he was for Seattle, and Jamal Adams, and what he's done for the Jets in Seattle, and other safeties, Tyrann Mathieu, they're a big key to the game now. And the Eagles have just, for whatever reason, decided that they're not taking a safety in the first 3 rounds for a long time, too long.
It felt like for a while that if you didn't have a safety, Troy Polamalu, like when that team was winning, and you mentioned Earl Thomas, like you had to have a safety, and the Eagles have kind of bypassed it. All right, couple other things to get to. Brandon Graham, what do we know about what his contract might look like?
Well, I get what I've seen is that they're going to add another year onto that contract, which is kind of what they've been doing. It's weird on who they've decided to just give a straight restructure to and who they've given an extension to. For example, Isaac Seumalo, as Adam Kaplan reported, got just a simple restructure in that I don't think any years were added. Now, here's a young guy who actually has played fairly well, who you can probably envision being on the team for 3 or 4 years more, even though I think there's only 2 years left on his deal. So you could understand if they wanted to add an extra year or two, that doesn't have to be a dummy year. He could be on the team making the money that's on the cap. But instead, and maybe it's to save more money, who only Howie Roseman knows, some of the older guys have gotten dummy years added so they can spread out some of that money. But it's very clear Brandon Graham will be on the Eagles' books for a couple of years, and he'll probably, I imagine, retire as an Eagle. I don't think he's going to see the end of this contract, which would probably go to 2024 or 25, but if he does, God bless him.
Yeah, this is an extension for Graham, not a restructuring. This looks like it's going to be a extension for Graham, which his contract was set to expire after this season. He would have been a free agent in 2022. It now looks like he will no longer be a free agent in 2022. We'll try to get the confirmation on that. Brandon Brooks got a restructure over the weekend. You mentioned Seumalo. So with Brooks' restructuring, is that a sign that they plan on keeping him?
Oh, I would think so. Yeah. I mean, I would think at that point, because again, you've moved money in them. Now, I guess it doesn't make him untradeable, but then if you traded him, all that money that you've guaranteed, that you've taken that was not guaranteed and made it guaranteed, accelerates into this year. So I don't know. I mean, sure, if you got a great pick, you would do it, accelerate the money into this year, and just you'd have to make sure you're continuously under the cap to absorb whatever you're taking. But it's a lot. I just don't see it happening. I think he's going to be on the team.
I agree with that. Hargrave also got a restructuring. You guys on Inside the Birds today, I believe it was Adam that mentioned the kicker Jake Elliott also is getting a restructuring.
Yeah, so the funny part was trying to figure out any Eagle that was not on a rookie deal that didn't get restructured, right? There's more guys who got restructured that didn't get restructured, right? I mean, right now, I think Lane Johnson did not get one.
Yet.
Alex Singleton did not get one. And Fletcher Cox so far has not gotten one. Everybody else, I think, has gotten one.
Okay.
Or else they're on a rookie deal.
So let's look at that. So they're about 17 and change still over. Is that math jive with you?
You know what? I always say, like, what you see reported is not what the team has. And some of these restructures today or that are in today have to be approved. And if they're approved by the NFLPA, the number can change instantaneously. So I don't think anybody can really honestly tell you.
Okay. So let's say they're in that 17 to 20, 15 to 20, somewhere in that range. They have the rest of the day, Tuesday, and by 4 o'clock Wednesday. The Zach Ertz situation. I mean, he's frustrated. They want third and fourth. We've talked about we don't see that happening. I mean, the stare down comes to, are we willing to take a fifth or a sixth or just flat out cut him, right? Is that what that comes down to?
Well, Adam addressed it really well today on the podcast. There's a market for him, so he's probably not going to get cut. I had heard a while back that Howie was looking for a 3 for Ertz. And so knowing the situation that he's in, there's a market, but a lot of teams also know that Howie's got to unload him. So maybe it's more realistic that he gets a 4. Maybe he gets a conditional 4. Now, if you're going to take a conditional pick, that means the pick would be next year, not this year. If I was Howie, I would try to look for that to see if I can get a 4 that turns into a 3 if Zach Ertz still is highly productive, which I still think he can be depending on what team he's on. And I don't mind pushing that pick to next year because I got 10 picks this year. I'm pretty good. I've got 2 third-rounders, even though I don't have a 4th-rounder. I would still try to get that, and then maybe next year get the potential of having an extra first because of the Wentz trade, and then maybe getting a 3rd from the conditional Ertz trade. That's how I would look at it.
Right.
But remember, Mike, that a trade can't be consummated officially until the league year begins. And the Eagles have to be at the cap already before that. So if the Eagles right now agreed to trade Zach Ertz to whoever, it doesn't really help that money that they're over the cap right now.
All right, so that's $8.25 million that can't help them one way or the other until after 4 o'clock on Wednesday, which means they still have to strategically figure out a way to cut, I don't know, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20 million bucks. Where are they getting it? Where are they strategically finding this?
I thought that number was more prior to the Brandon Graham restructure. So,
okay.
And maybe even before the Jake Elliott one got officialized. So I don't know, but you look, we know that they're going. Here's what's important: we know they're going to be at the cap.
Well,
by
I guess
Wednesday.
my question is: do we envision to get there that they're going to have to do something drastic, like cut someone that they don't want to cut?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. We'll see what happens with Derek Barnett. I mean, Adam Kaplan reported that they're content to have him playing at the $10 million 5th option this year, which tells me that they know they're going to be compliant, of course, because they have to be without any more major moves, and B, once it's the new league year and they trade Ertz, right, or get rid of Ertz, and that clears $8 more million. Then they can maybe kind of talk about what backup quarter, but like they don't need this to be $20 million under the cap right now or by Wednesday because they're racing to get some really expensive free agent. They're obviously going to be selective and they're going to be limited. So I would assume the market's going to go on for a couple of days before you see the Eagles make any kind of bigger move.
All right. What are we hearing about Jacoby Brissett? That one's interesting to me. Inside the Birds, you guys talked about it today. Adam said he's hearing from multiple people about Brissett, which I like Brissett. The dots obviously connect them, but it kind of sounds counterintuitive to the Mortensen report that they would want to bring a quarterback in to compete. If I'm Brissett, I think, hey, I want to compete with Hurts. I don't want to just come here to be his backup.
Yeah, see, so Adam and I have talked about this, and it's kind of confusing because I think everybody agrees that the Eagles need a veteran backup quarterback because right now the only quarterback under contract is Jalen Hurts. So you're going to need 2 quarterbacks, probably a developmental one and then a veteran one. So I don't know too many veteran quarterbacks that you can bring in that don't have some kind of resume. Joe Flacco's won a Super Bowl. Tyrod Taylor has been a Pro Bowl quarterback, a playoff quarterback, and Jacoby Brissett has had a level of success in this league.
Not to mention,
I don't see how he
made $15 million last year.
I know the biggest thing to me is if you wind up spending 10 to 12 million or more on a backup quarterback this year, doesn't that go against everything you said you wanted to be last year when you drafted Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round? So,
yeah.
I don't know. Obviously it's a very weird year, and the cap being low means that guys like Jacoby Brissett, Mike, may not be able to get the same kind of money that they got last year. We'll see. There are a decent number of veteran backups out there, so that may also hurt as far as backups looking to get top dollar. I mentioned Tyrod Taylor. I mentioned Flacco. There's going to be like 3 or 4 other guys. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Andy Dalton are out there. So the Eagles should be able to come away with somebody. But no matter who it is, as I said on the podcast, if the Eagles are 2-6 after 8 games, hypothetically, you know how it is. Like, you're going to start looking at that veteran backup maybe as a life preserver. It's just how it is.
Yeah, and that's why if with the cap situation, which apparently they're going to be fine in that spot, which I don't know. I never go into these things all that concerned about the cap because if there's one thing about Roseman, I know he's going to figure out a way to get you out of the cap problems, and it appears that they're going to get to that spot. And then the next step, can they add players? To say that I can add a veteran quarterback of that kind of salary seems to be counterintuitive, like you said, to what this team needs to do. So I don't know. I mean, unless Brissett figures, hey, I'll take less money with a better chance to play because I know the system.
We'll see. I mean, again, it all is probably going to come down to, for him, money. I don't know that there's a couple that are going to be teams looking to sign Jacoby Brissett to start or compete to start, like really get a true competition to start, but maybe there is, and that might be a more ideal offer. And then you're on to plan B and plan C, and that's okay probably because you're looking at Jalen Hurts as your starter anyway. But I do think Brissett and Tyrod Taylor make the most sense because of their familiarity with the offense and the scheme.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. If you listened to the podcast this morning, you got the Jake Elliott news. You heard the Brissett stuff in there. And, one of the, I guess, Wednesday, typically any free agent that's available, there's been a lot of cap casualties, have always been connected to the Eagles for one reason. Roseman always does his due diligence and makes these calls. Do you anticipate that we will hear them involved in some of these calls?
Well, they've got to be. I mean, you look at cornerback situation. And by the way, with losing Jalen Mills, I had this thought today that I'll share with you first. I haven't even talked to Adam about it. I wonder the fact that we don't know much about the new defensive staff speaks volumes, right? So we just have to kind of wonder things. When he was a rookie, Avonte Maddox had to move to safety for like 5 or 6 games because they had so many injuries, and he played really well there. And now that they're, young at safety, and Maddox is not someone who projects as an outside corner, and it's easier to find a nickel. In fact, you could bring back, I say, Trevon LeBlanc or Roby Coleman if you wanted to at a cheap price. Maybe moving Maddox back to safety wouldn't be such a bad idea right now. I have no idea. But the bottom line is they don't have another outside corner. And so you've got to be at least in the market and making calls and seeing what guys like Xavier Rhodes, who played for the both the Vikings and the Colts, which is where Gannon comes from, both those teams. Mackenzie Alexander is a cornerback who played for the Vikings. Malik Hooker is a safety who played for the Colts. I mean, you got to look at some of these guys who either had injury history or aging and see if you can't get a bargain out of it.
Yeah, definitely. And he, we have that tendency to try to connect the dots. Hey, you were in Indianapolis. These guys know you from Indianapolis. You mentioned Hooker, a guy who has had some injury problems but was a first-round pick. Those guys tend to follow the guy with them because they feel comfortable to say, all right, I was hurt. I'm not going to get the money, but I can play well because I don't need to learn a whole new system. So you might be able to find some guys under the radar like that because we just talked about it. You lose Mills and Ford, you need a safety in a bad. And somebody texted in earlier about corner. Without Mills, you have no other outside corner currently on the roster, so going to need to go down that road as well. There's a lot happening, so keep it locked. Sports Bash Football at 4. We'll have plenty more all this week as free agency opens on Wednesday. And Geoff Mosher and the crew over at Inside the Birds, check out the latest podcast this morning. They have a little free agent preview in there, the stuff on Elliott, the stuff on Brissett. But these backup quarterbacks, that's another interesting spot. I'm surprised that they might spend a decent amount of money on that position. That is one surprising thing to me. If they have money to spend and they spend it at that position would be an interesting thing because that almost goes against like saying to bring someone in to compete with him. Like if I'm going to pay a guy, I want him to compete, right?
Yeah, but I mean, even like, okay, so Tyrod Taylor signed with the Chargers last year. He had to know that they were picking in the top 10 and were probably going to pick a quarterback, which they did in Justin Herbert. And I'm sure he had to know that even as he started the year, that there was going to be some time during the year that the kid was going to play. Now, the injury that happened with the punctured lung or whatever it was really unfortunate. But I'm sure Tyrod Taylor knew at some point, like that's the life of being a veteran backup. They're always looking for the young kid to replace you. So when Jeffrey Lurie says, let's build around Jalen Hurts, I don't think that necessarily means you can't bring in a veteran backup who's got some kind of credentials to him, because it's still going to be the Jalen Hurts show until he gets hurt or he just proves that he can't do the job very well.
All right, we'll have Football at 4 back tomorrow. We'll keep it locked for all of the free agent news for the rest of the day. Two birds out, Mills and Ford. For more, go to 97.3 ESPN.com. And a new Inside the Birds drops on Thursday, and they got a whole bunch of new lineup. Check out Inside the Birds for a entire lineup of great material on this Eagles offseason. Q&A tomorrow. You're going to have Cosell for the draft, so it's going to be a lot of good stuff. All right, man. We will catch up to you on Wednesday.
All right, my friend. Take care.
He's Geoff Mosher. That's Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the free mobile app. There you go.